As you can see, we're going to be going through how to effectively manage your time and expenses. Before we get started, just a quick round of introductions. I'm John, Practice Manager of Business Applications. I'm joined by my colleagues, Kaylee, a Business Solutions Consultant and Pre-Sale Engineer, Logan, Business Solutions Consultant, and Tanya, our Client Success Manager. And today we're going to be walking you through a variety of business benefits around effective time and expense management and a thorough demonstration of the capabilities within the software. For those of you that haven't joined us before, thank you for participating today and being involved. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in our chat in Zoom. Tanya will be tracking those questions. And if they're related to the content that we're discussing at that time, we'll do our best to address it right then and there. Alternatively, we can address questions at the end of our session today as well. All right. As we jump in, just a quick preview of the items that we'll be discussing. First off, understanding our key business benefits. When we look at implementing our time and expense management, where does that track in Acumatica? What will I be able to view as a business owner, as a business lead, or as a team member coding perhaps time and expenses? What does that look like for me? As we get into the demo side here, we'll start off with our time management, entering time activities, tracking that into the role of a time card. We'll also then get into our expense management side. So the expense receipts, the expense claims that sit on top of that. We'll proceed into the approval overview. And so within Acumatica, as we know, there's going to be workflow capabilities that we can take advantage of. If you're utilizing those today in certain aspects of your business, you'll be able to apply that same type of logic within the time and expense management process. We'll also dive into the reporting capabilities. We have a few items that we want to show you in that regard, some sample dashboards that will sit on top of the time and expense side for easy drill down, especially as an individual entering time and expenses. How can I track my project activity, perhaps that I'm coding against in this process? Then we'll wrap it up with some next steps, how you can learn more about this functionality and what we have coming up. All right. So to jump right in, our key business benefits of effective time and expense management. We start off with the functionality, the native time and expense capture. As you'll see within the system today, this is going to be integrated directly into Acumatica. So we're not talking about installing additional software in this process. It's going to be using native Acumatica functionality that extends into project accounting, construction, into our manufacturing, our payroll, all connected within our Acumatica ecosystem. So a priority there is making sure that everything stays centralized within Acumatica and we can effectively manage that. As we know, Acumatica is device agnostic, being a cloud-based ERP. Anywhere we can access a browser, we can access Acumatica. So one really important aspect of the time and expense management is giving our team the opportunity to upload or to enter that information while on the go. So we'll cover that from the browser standpoint, but what you also see today is the mobile device capabilities as well. So for those that haven't been in the mobile app for quite some time, you'll notice a refreshed interface that's available through Apple and Android. So we want to make sure that we can understand the capabilities there, how that translates from the browser, and how we can also view the level of detail that we need if we're in an approver role, not just from an entry perspective, but if we're approving, if we need to see these details at a higher level, that's all available through the mobile app. All right. Then as I had stated within the demo side that we'll be covering the approval workflows. So anytime this information is being entered, we can establish approval workflows within this process. We'll take a look at time activities in the time card, where perhaps we can have approval workflows within that process at a more detailed level or at a higher level. Always keeping in mind that we can have different tiers of workflow as needed, perhaps by department, by type of project that we're working on. Maybe we have different tiers within that workflow to help drive our approval. Same on the expense receipts and the expense claim side. And what we also covered in a previous webinar, our last one actually on the 23R1, is Acumatica has made enhancements around the approval workflow to help accommodate exceptions in your approval process, where historically we had to do quite a bit of work around work groups and establishing backups through the company tree. We now have the capability to go through the reassignment process if that's needed, or set a designated approver if we're out of office. All of those capabilities coming together in the time and expense management side as well. Lastly, on the project accounting side, this is where we see a huge benefit to our time and expense tracking, being able to code to projects, to certain tasks, mark certain items for billable or non-billable to help that billing cycle within our organization. We can also run metrics within our projects for our employees, the types of employees, and the types of projects that we're working on. So we can get a real clear understanding of where our costs within projects are going, and ultimately our revenue that's being generated from those projects. Again, a key theme for us is making sure that we keep everything centralized. It always becomes a pain point when we have a lot of manual processes. So what can we leverage within Acumatica and this native capability to make sure that we can enter information effectively in the system? And when it's there, how can we review it? How can we process it? And how can we dig into the data when we have certain questions, perhaps around project profitability, or in the construction side, if we have construction costs that we need to track at a deeper level? How do we get that information? All right through the Acumatica system. All right. As we proceed, we'll be jumping over into the demo. So as I said, we'll be turning it over to Logan here to start with our time management side. And as we proceed, one thing to keep in mind, we just have a little sneak peek of it, is wrapping it up with a dashboard once we have this data in the system. All right. So I think, Logan, I can turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I'll go ahead and share out my screen here and jump into Acumatica. Perfect. All right, so today we're going to be operating in the time and expenses module. So you're going to see some parallel processing between expense management and the time management. So on the time management side, we have employee time activities, which feed into the employee time cards. On the expense management side, we have expense receipts, which are going to feed into the expense claims. In terms of approval, we have the approval set at the time card level and the expense claim level to allow individuals to enter in either their time or their expense receipts throughout the month without needing individual approvals. This makes the process easier, having one final product to review and then approve before releasing it. But to start today, we'll jump into the employee time activities in our time and expenses module. And so as you can see, I populated a few lines here in preparation for this call, but right away, a few things that are going to default in is one, your employee ID. So again, I'm entering this in for myself. The from week and the to week. So depending on how you're coding your time, if it is a weekly or bi-weekly time card, you can expand this range into what time activities you're seeing here populated. We could further filter this down again. So relating back to the project accounting, we could filter this by project. So if I were to go in here and, for example, select, I guess, time coded against internal 23 here, we would only see time coded against that project. We can go even more granular into project tasks as well. If I go ahead and clear this out, so we'll see one, we have regular time. So I'll show you time spent, and then the billable time that is denoted by just this billable checkbox here. So if it were deselected, some of that time could be totaled into our time spent without being billable. We'll also see the ability you can code time for overtime. That would be totaled at the top here as well. Moving down to the bottom or towards the bottom of our screen here, we'll see a few different statuses. So we have completed and then open. So typically what that completed means is that's going to be sent to your time card for further processing. You'll eventually be submitting that time card. You can't actually modify the completed status, but until that time card is submitted, you can toggle on and off to go back into an open status. If any of the information here is incorrect, you can modify that further. Keep that in completed and hit our save here. Let's go ahead and add in another line. So again, defaults into that open status based on the dates we have populated here. That's what will pull this field. We can modify the date to whatever is most applicable. We can change the time. So this is the advantage of using the time activities rather than entering directly on the time card. You have more granular view of your time. You can track it by time of day for means of just staying on track, making sure you're entering all your time accurately. We can more specifically enter in a work group if applicable. We also have our earning type. So the default here is going to be regular hours. We could set that in for overtime, a holiday, things of that nature. We do have that ability to specify that there. We have a task designation here. So a little bit of a difference between a regular task and Acumatica. If you are familiar, a task can be related to a number of different entities in Acumatica. If we were to track time against that, isn't specifically to project accounting. Our project and project task. Here's where this is specific to tracking time against projects. So if I go here and select, let's go with our internal 23 again. We can then select a task to code our time against. So we have a few options here, operations, training, and software. Let's go ahead and hit our training task here. We'll then populate a cost code. We could have a number of different cost codes here if applicable. I'll go ahead and hit our zeros for this demonstration here. We could also have labor items set up for further breakdown of our time. And then our next field to be time spent. So let's say I spent 2 hours here on this specific task. That'll automatically populate that billable time. And again, we could toggle this billable checkbox if not applicable. Based on our project task, that will populate a description. We can override this field, make it more granular as needed. So I'll go ahead and save that. If everything on this screen looks accurate, I'm going to go ahead and take all of these off hold and go into that completed status. We'll go ahead and hit save. And so everything you see here is going to funnel directly into the time card within Acumatica. So I'll pop back open the time and expenses module and go into our time cards. All right, and we'll create a new one. And so as I mentioned previously, just a little bit less granular. So what this is going to be summing up is by project, task, and then date. So for example, we're working on the internal 23 project task 03 here. You could see the breakdown by date. And again, you can enter in time directly on this screen, just a little bit less granular. Some of the same information is going to default in. So my employee ID, the status will be on hold. We'll be taking that off to send for approval here in a minute. We can also see the totals of our time, what time was billable as well. I'll go ahead and hit save here. And just to demonstrate how you could code time in directly to the line here, I'll create another line. So let's go ahead and we'll select the non-project code and we'll enter in the cost code. And then we can just directly select a date for when we completed this task. So if you are using less granular time, we could, for example, just put 8 hours on Friday and go ahead and hit save. After review, if you feel comfortable with the information that's populated on this card, we would go ahead and submit. Give it a second here to load. And what the submit will do, go ahead.
I was going to say, as that time card is processing, one piece that I want to just point out too is that labor item. So that's defaulting based off of Logan's alias here, Diego, and his employee. So if we have different labor items with different rates as they flow into our project, we can have that default for our employee, but that is a selectable item. So as you are working perhaps on a certain project or project task, and a different labor item would be appropriate, as an employee, I can select that. But we typically see, at least at the employee level, a default to help drive that time coding, and also to any rate that would sit on top of that as it flows into the project task.
Great. As you can see, this went into the pending approval status. Once we pull that off hold, that correlates directly with our approval map configuration. So the individual you have set for approval, that's where it would be directed. This you can see listed assigned to Jane Doe. I have a sneaky feeling that might be Kaylee. We might show the other side here of actually approving these documents from the managerial side. But that's just letting you know who is assigned to approve your time card in this case. As I mentioned before, kind of parallel processing. So we went through the time activities to the time cards. On the expense management side, we have our receipts and then our claims. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new expense receipt here. And so again, defaulting in our date based on the system date we have, the claim by is going to be your employee ID, and then your branch based on which one you're logged into. You can update this as needed. Our expense item is going to be a non-stock item we have set up for exactly this, expense receipts and claims. This will drive some of the fields that are going to populate down below as well. If I go ahead here and select, let's go ahead and hit travel. We'll want to add in a description as it is a required field here. So we'll say business travel to conference and save that. We can then add in a quantity and a cost. Let's just say that was $500 here. We could then enter in a reference number if applicable. We have our project designation. So if this is specifically for one specific project, if I go ahead and hit our internal 23 project again, we can then select a task more specifically. We'll hit our operations and then a cost code. So again, it's very similar to what we were walking through on the time entry side. We'll go ahead and populate these fields. If I had an expense claim already set up in the system, so what this is going to do is if you were, let's just say doing June or July expenses, maybe you're submitting that at the end of the month, you can assign this to an expense claim that is already open. I'll go through creating a new claim and assigning additional receipts, but you can just assign them to a claim throughout the month and then submit it at the end of the month. Again, so it's one individual approval at the end of the month, just kind of streamlining that process. We'll leave that blank for now. The paid with here, so we have a few options. So if it is a personal account, the employee will obviously need to be reimbursed. So that would create an AP invoice to that employee, similarly to what you would see for a vendor. If it was a corporate card for a company expense, we would then see the recognition in the system, which we'll see in a minute here, the recognition of that cash. Again, this is just driving the further processing after you submit your expense claim. We also have the ability to code against a corporate card for a personal expense. I don't know how common that is, but we do have that processing option as well. Based on our non-stock item configuration, we can see the expense account and sub-account automatically populated. We could update those as needed as well. The image here, so this would be a good place to upload a supporting receipt or any supporting document, further information for this specific expense receipt, and that will funnel into the expense claim as well. We'll go ahead and save. And so again, at this stage, you could go back in here, make any necessary modifications. We have not gone through the claim process. The expense receipts before they're released can be modified up until the point, again, that you submit your claim.
So Logan, as we're going through perhaps a month, maybe we're traveling a lot, especially after COVID, we're getting back out into the field and we're tracking a lot of these expenses. We can roll our receipts right into the system, but then wrap it all together with an expense claim at the end of the month. All of that is going to flow into the expense claim as a next step. And as we take a look at coding the items, for instance, the travel piece of it, again, want to highlight that as a non-stock item in the system to drive the financial information. So we can set that up so that our team members aren't having to navigate through our chart of accounts or sub-accounts. If we have departmental sub-accounts that are associated with the employee, can have all of that driven by just having the item that they select. And so a helpful benefit to having our non-stock item or expense types structured for us. Our employees won't have to worry about the back end. That's for our accounting and our financial team.
Awesome. Again, so the next processing step here would be to claim this. So to generate an expense claim, that wouldn't be there if we already had an existing claim. We were just attaching that onto. That would be this field here that we're populating. I'll go ahead and show what that creation of an expense claim would look like though here. This is going to pull us directly to our expense claim. Again, a lot of the same information populating on the top here. Our description will default into submitted receipts, probably not the most helpful. So we can just say June for Diego here. And we'll see that receipt automatically populating here as we did just further processing from the previous screen. One thing I do want to highlight is we can add in other receipts. So in preparation for this call, I did create a few receipts and we can go ahead and add these in. And actually we'll hit this add receipts. And here we go. We can see a few. I just added in a business dinner and travel to conference. One of these is a personal expense. So we can see that processing as well, just for some context. I'll go ahead and select both of these. And I'll close out. So see again, that claim is now totaling all 3 of our expense receipts that is on one single document that will need to be approved here. I'll hit save. We are on an on hold status. So same thing as with the time card. The submit is what is going to send it for approval. I'll go ahead and do so now. We'll then see our pending approval status. And then underneath approvals, that is assigned to Jane Doe. And this kind of leads into Kaylee sharing out what that looks like from the managerial side, approving the expense claim and the time card. And she'll actually be doing so on the mobile application to show some of that functionality as well.
Yeah.
With that, I'll stop sharing my screen. Yep.
Thank you, Logan. I'll go ahead and share my mobile device. All right, and we'll go into Acumatica here. All right, so as John had discussed when pointing out some of those main benefits in Acumatica, it's device agnostic, right? So I have the ability to easily approve what I need to on my mobile device. So I'll run through that process now. So I'll just go into my approvals screen. And as Logan had pointed out, since I was set up as the approver, I'm able to see both that time card and expense claim that he had just walked us through. So I can go in and view some of those details. So I can, view a summary if I want to. I can view additional details within that time card and see those specific days, hours spent, as well as some additional details, including a description and project. If there was any files attached to here, I could see those as well. I'll just go back. And if everything looks good, I can go ahead and approve it directly through my mobile device, as well as release that. And similarly, we can do the same thing with this expense claim as well. So I'll click into that. If I go into more details here, we see all those expense receipts he had submitted. So if we click into one of these, again, we can see a little bit more information related to that. We can see that actual file he had uploaded of the physical receipt as well. And if everything looks good, again, with all these expense receipts, I can easily go in and approve as well. So once I approve and release that, we can see that the status changes to released. I do have the ability, however, to go back and correct it if I want to as well. So again, Acumatica makes it really easy to manage time and expenses, anywhere on any device at any given time. So while I'm still sharing my mobile device, I'm going to point out another good feature that's easy to do on the mobile device, which is capture an expense receipt. I can go in, capture the expense receipt, and this allows me to take a picture of any receipt I have and easily upload it through there. All right. And so it's going to recognize some of that information within the actual picture. So we'll give it a moment to do so, and then we'll kind of show where that populates. So we can see it took that description right from the name of the restaurant we were at and added it to the expense item business, dinner, and lunch. I can go ahead and edit that and change that if I want to. Same thing goes for the description. I could add a more in-depth description to that. And then we can see that $42.74 amount was taken right from the receipt as well, just by doing the picture of it. And again, everything that Logan had walked us through on the desktop for an expense receipt, we have those same options within the mobile device as well. So I won't go ahead and show all of that, but just know it is available and easy to add. And with that, I will go ahead and save it. So we could then walk through the process of, creating an expense claim and submitting it for approval as well. But just another way that Acumatica makes that time and expense management easy for the user. So with that, I'm going to send it back over to Logan, and he will walk us through some additional features.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaylee. Go ahead and share on my screen again.
And Kaylee, I know that you had submitted an expense for a $42 dinner. And if we needed to, in the case of Diego here submitting what I believe was a $150 lunch at Chipotle, we have the ability to reject and provide a note back. if that's needed as well. We approved it, but we have that ability to not only set it back to a rejected status, but to attach a note to that. So Diego knows that we might need some more information on this $150 lunch that he had at Chipotle. Right.
All right, so then just kind of finish out the processing of an expense claim. So again, that was approved by Kaylee and released by Kaylee. So again, just recognizing one, the bill for the personal card use for a company expense. So that'll generate a bill just like you would see for a vendor. So underneath the financial tab of an expense claim, we can head into this hyperlink here. And so again, we'll see that inventory ID of travel, that non-stock item that we had set up. We'll see we can just go ahead and pay this just like you would a normal invoice. It'll contain all that detail. You can see the project task. And when we finish processing this, it will also link back to our GL. So you can see the journal transaction here related back with that expense claim as well. If I go ahead and expand the screen, we can see we have a credit to our accounts payable account, a debit to that travel expense. Go ahead and close out of this. And then for the corporate card, again, we want to recognize that change in cash. We'll see the cash purchase here was automatically generated and closed out. So if I actually hit into this reference number, we can see, and just one thing to note, this was previously a quick check in previous versions of Acumatica. It has now been renamed to a cash purchase in 2023 R1. So see some of that similar information here. So we had two separate receipts funneling into this for the same project and task. So those are combined into one single cash purchase in this case. And we could also review the journal transaction that was generated as well. Exiting that out of here. So one other thing that I did want to work through was the approval map. So as you saw that both the time card and the expense claim were routed to Kaylee. So just understanding what goes into that configuration. So if we go ahead and hit the actual configuration module, we'll see the assignment and approval map. In here, let's just go into the expense claim approval, what we just worked through. As you can see at the top here, we'll have the entity type designation. So this is not specific to time and expense management. We have this ability for commonly AP bills or AP invoices, purchase orders, journal transactions now have the functionality as well. Throughout Acumatica, a bunch of different entities, and the same kind of workflow applies for all of them. Here we can kind of see an example of it broken down by department. So depending on what department the user is a part of, that's where it's going to route the expense claim. And we can have different individuals from each different department set as approvers. We also have the ability to select from a number of different conditions. So things like total, you can see here we have employee and department. So this is going to be a sales department approval, less than 1,000. On top of that, we could have a tiered approach. So we could either have, if it's over 5,000, or in this case, 1,000, I guess, on the sales team, we could have multiple approvers within the sales team, and then even another tier for accounting approval. So everything has to go through accounting approval after it gets through the departmental workflow. On the rule actions, this is where you actually specify who is going to be that approver. So it could be one individual person. It could also be a work group. So you could have a primary approver of Jane Doe, as we just saw, but backup approvers as the sales work group, which is set at the company tree level. This just gives you a backup of different approvers that could step in and approve if Jane Doe is unable to look at it. On that note, again, a new feature of 23R1 is the allow reassignment of approvals. So taking that a step further, we could reassign Jane Doe's approvals for a specified period of time to another employee in the system. So if you're out for a week, we can make sure to reroute those. And that's just a setting we would set on your profile, essentially an out of office, to reassign those approvals. What this setting here is delineating is allowing that to actually happen. So if we didn't have a checkbox selected, other approvals would be rerouted for Jane Doe. If, for example, if she had that set, approval specifically to the expense claim would not, if this box was deselected. So you have to allow that on the actual approval map itself. All right. I think next thing that I kind of wanted to jump in here was going to be our reporting capabilities on the expense side. So going back into the time and expenses module. So we'll have our expense claim details by employee and by department. So the first one I'll show is going to be by employee. And again, depending where your position in the organization, if you're at a management level, you will have the ability to look at all the employees in lower tiers of the company tree to kind of analyze that breakdown by employee. So if I cleared out the company, we can set the start date and end date we want to view. We could also set this by branch. But if I go ahead and hit run report, again, I can see Layla from finance had 1,050 total. Jane Doe, we could see that 3,104 amount. And then Diego also had that 12,950, and it will total that. So this report is breaking it down again by employee for the time period that we have specified. Similarly, we can break this down by department. So again, if we wanted to see expense spend by department, this processing screen will be very similar as to what we just saw for the employees. I'll clear this out and run it. So you can see by construction, by consulting, by finance, their expense breakdown, and the total for the period that we have specified. As is true for a number of reports within Acumatica, we could print this directly. We could send this via email. We could export it to either Excel or PDF. Just further processing options that are available for many of the reports in Acumatica, but more specifically here for the expense claim details. Perfect. One other thing that I wanted to show here. So if we go into our data views here, we do have a dashboard set up for time and expenses. So this one specifically is going to show the individual employee that's logged in here, kind of their time breakdown for the period we have specified. So if we have a start date and an end date, so for that period, how does this break down? We have our billable time, for example. So we can see for 7/3, we had 8 hours of billable time. For 7/5, we had 8 hours of billable time, and kind of that breakdown down the line. We also have a more granular, just kind of a data table here. So for the entire month, you can kind of see where that time nets out. We can also set up colors. So if you're expecting more billable time, for example, on Tuesday, July 4th, hopefully none of you are working on July 4th. We have 0 here and it is highlighted as red. So that'd be maybe a day to look at. Why was that the case? We could also set up maybe the yellow is within an acceptable range and green would be great. So if you had 10 more hours, I would highlight green. Further making the visualization easier of the data on our dashboards. We also can see a pie chart here, so you can see the breakdown by project. Again, these are very customizable, so you could change this to be most applicable to how you'd want to see your time. We can modify these, just kind of a template that could be useful here. This time and expense dashboard. We also have our open time activities here. So if we wanted to view things that have not been released, this one looks like it's from June 28th, and if we're in July, we probably want to release that one. So the ability to add in any relevant data to our dashboard here, just make digesting that data a little bit easier.
And this is looking at it from, Logan, your perspective, or maybe I should say Diego here, for your time and expenses that have been recorded. And you can expand those parameters if you want to look just beyond July, if you want to look earlier in the year. And keeping in mind with the optimization side and dashboarding, this activity for any project dashboards can be funneled through those particular dashboards in the same fashion with that drill down capability. Also too, I know we didn't show examples of this through our process today, but again, keeping in mind perhaps optimization or communication out to our employees and our team. If we have expense claims that are being routed through the system, we can always send a notification if that's needed to say, hey, your expense claim has been approved, expect payment in 3 days, if that's appropriate, or for any corporate cards, to ensure that those have been properly accepted by the department manager or the accounting team. Same thing on the approver side. If you're involved in a lot of approvals, like Kaylee or Jane Doe here, you can have notifications that sit on top of that to notify you of when those approvals are needing to be committed to the system. So we can always set up notifications through business events to help drive that communication to the team. Always something to be aware of as we get into the effective time and expense management side. All right.
Great. Well, I think that kind of concludes my demo. I can stop my share and hand it over to John here to finish this out.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Logan. All right. So thank you for joining us today, walking through the time and expense management capabilities within Acumatica. We just have a few contact points here. And I'm just going to do a quick check. Logan and Kaylee, can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
I think I got booted again.
Oh, I think you did just get booted.
All right,
Yep.
let me
now
bring
we're
this
not
back.
seeing it. Yeah.
All right, let me bring it back here. All right, apologies for the Zoom glitch there, but you should be seeing the next step slide here. We have our points of contact here if you want to check out the SVA Consulting website for additional information. We have our technical support email here as well. If you have any questions, if you're in this process already and you have specific questions or want to expand on the functionality that you're using with consideration to what we walked through today, happy to address that. For any licensing questions, we have Tanya's email linked here as well. And getting into some of the advanced capabilities with time and expense management. If we take a look at the banking integration side, for those of us that are connected to our corporate credit card accounts through that native bank feed, we can have automation processes in place to help expedite the expense claim and the expense receiving process for corporate credit cards. So happy to talk through extending this capability as well. We have our next webinar coming up here in August. And if you would like, we have more of our webinars posted to our SVA Consulting Acumatica webinar playlist within our YouTube channel. And so in that, you'll see our 23R1 new features review, where we cover some of the components of that reassignment process that Logan was referring to. And then, as always, you have the Acumatica community available to you as well, where there's a number of forums that have been generated around this. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our team. With that, I'd like to pause. And Tanya, do we have any questions in the queue?
We do not.
All right. Well, with that, we can end today's webinar. Again, thank you for attending and look forward to seeing you in August for our next one. We'll be sharing some more details around that as we get closer to that date. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.